Okay, welcome everybody. We are joined here by Dr. Arielle Schwartz for vagal toning for well-being. Arielle is a clinical psychologist, EMDR consultant, somatic psychotherapist, yoga instructor, and internationally sought out teacher. She has authored 6 books, including the Complex PTSD Workbook, the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook, and Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma. My personal suggestion here is to subscribe to her YouTube and her e-news. She sends out the best practices, and I love everything that she shares with us. She is also a former board member of the Grief Support Network, who still serves as a very trusted advisor and friend. So Arielle, thank you for being here. I would like to reiterate some of our guidelines as we do with every session. The chat function will be in use this session. Thank you for the folks that sent me an email that said it was not working with that webinar style. We're not doing webinar style anymore. Too many issues there. But the chat function is working. Please treat this space respectfully. Anyone that abuses this space using words of hate or judgment or any harmful words will be removed from the summit as a whole. We do our best to keep that space safe and brave for all involved. And with that, I will pass things over to Dr. Arielle Schwartz.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but your comment touched me. It is nice to be in a small group, isn't it? I know. It's intimate, and it's really lovely for me as well to be able to just kind of orient to who's here and to simply just kind of drop in and be present together. And yeah. And I'm grateful to Grief Support Network for hosting the entire event, and certainly for bringing me in to be able to share some things with you all. So lovely to be here. Noticing some folks are still coming in. Hi, Joy. I'm glad to know you're here. So what I am here to share with you today is going to be a little bit of a practice, which I think we'll start in with. And then I'll share some slides that just kind of hold a little bit of the frame of the model and you know, not get too heady with it, because I don't know that that's really of great benefit to anybody right now. So I'd love just to have an opportunity to drop in and feel together. And my intention, I think intention is powerful, is my intention is today around the roots of compassion and the kind of powerful ways in which we are just deeply interconnected with each other. And that when we attend to our own body and mind and our own internal healing process, that ripples out and resonates out, not only within our own fabric of healing our past and present and illuminating our future, but also kind of holding how that can resonate into our ancestral lineage in various directions as well. And also the collective amount of grief and trauma that is here in our world right now. And that when each of us is attending here to the piece that's right in front of us, to that available step of where we work with what is here for you and you and you and me, right? When we work with what is here, that has a very profound impact on that larger piece. I think the kind of global or collective nature of grief can feel overwhelming. And so my intention is to take one very digestible piece. And so with this intention around the roots of compassion, I'm going to share a quote that is a quote that I have found meaningful over the years when kind of working with my own grief, when my own trauma. And this quote is from Joan Halifax. And She writes, "The roots of all beings, of all living things, are tied together. Deep in the ground of being, they tangle and embrace. The roots of all living things are tied together. Deep in the ground of being, they tangle and embrace. And if we look deeply, we find that we do not have a separate self-identity, a self that does not include sun and wind, earth and water, creatures and plants, and one another. And if we look deeply, we find that we do not have a separate self-identity, a self that does not include sun and wind, earth and water, creatures and plants, and one another. It's what I so deeply appreciate about spaces like this, where we can connect in community, in group space, where we can feel the resonating elements of how compassion is actually a very palpable experience across space and closes the gaps of distance, even over Zoom, even across state lines or country lines or political lines, and et cetera, right? Like there's something really powerful, really powerful. So with that said, I'm going to shift on to my mat and we'll do about 15, 20 minutes of just some very gentle movement practice. And then I'm going to share with you a little bit of the why of that. And then we'll have maybe a little time for conversation. An hour feels so little and how much, the grand scheme, but I know you're all taking in a lot this whole summit, these 3 days. So find a comfortable space, and you do not need to have a yoga mat for what I'm about to guide you through at all. It's not a necessity. I'm going to shift my view for a moment just so that I can see what you're seeing. Okay. It's absolutely not necessary. You can do everything that I'm going to guide you in here, seated in your bed, on a couch, whatever is your comfortable space. And the invitation to start is to bring your palms together if you'd like, and just rub your palms. When I teach therapeutic yoga from, probably very much in alignment with all of what you're hearing here with GSN, it is all an invitational journey. And so you have choice to opt in or opt out of anything I suggest. And I will perhaps invite, and again, you can opt out of this if it doesn't feel right, to take these perhaps now warmed up palms, these chi-filled palms, and bring them over your very own eyes. And maybe let your head rest into your hands. And notice what it feels like to rest your eyes, especially on days where we're engaged in connecting through a screen, which in itself can be a little bit exhaustive of the senses. So just giving your sensory input a shift, letting your eyes be supported. And if you're engaging in this, perhaps letting your eyes be soft, taking in the feeling of the darkness that comes with covering your eyes. And if at any point the interior space feels like it's more than you want right now, you can remove your hands and open your eyes and look around. So you're in charge. And if you're staying with this position of your eyes closed and your head supported, perhaps taking notice of the other senses that are present. The sound, maybe the sound of my voice. You might even Give yourself a chance to just create a sigh and hear the sound of your own voice. And then totally up to you, but you might even give that a little bit of a hum so that there's even a vibration. And I'm feeling drawn in my body to sway just a little bit from side to side. And if you're giving yourself a little hum, which doesn't always come through well in Zoom in Zoom microphones, so just following your own internal sensing the vibration of your own voice in your throat or your chest. And you might even let your thumbs come over your ears, and it will create another sensory experience. You can keep your palms or your fingers over your eyes and just reaching thumbs to navigate that you can amplify the sound of your very own voice inside of your ears, and you can sense how it resonates in your head and your throat and your chest. And knowing that once you do that, you've probably closed off your ability to hear me as well. So just maybe one more round. And then releasing thumbs from your ears, palms from your face, and setting your palms down for just a moment in a pause or a moment of receiving what happens with just that input to body and mind and your own being, your presence. That invitation to go inward and just allowing your own presence to fill the space. And if you'd like to join in just a little bit more of an experience here, maybe rubbing your palms together. And this time, taking your hands back to your very own face and just sweeping touch. You can sweep across your hairline and over the top of your scalp, across your forehead, towards your temples and your ears. You could roll out your ears, maybe sweeping across your cheekbones. And there's some really tender little places in our face where there's pressure points and also places where the vagus nerve comes a little closer to the surface. I'm coming closer just for visual purposes here, that you might explore kind of this pressure point here right between the eyebrows. And you could pause on that for a moment, just greeting and smoothing outward, or gentle circular massage right in here. So often when we feel grief or we have a headache, we just are drawn to this place anyhow. So just noticing how it feels to do that consciously. And we can do the same thing following under the eyes, out from the bridge of the nose, and then feeling at the tops of the cheekbones that there could be some tender places there. And you can give that a little bit of contact or circular movement, or a sweeping movement as we pass over the cheekbones out towards the temples. And we'll greet one third spot here. This is under the cheekbone, sliding down to the outside of the nostrils and then out under your cheekbones. And again, there can be a really tender place in here. And you can find some circular movements or sweeping by on your way towards your ears. Oh, man, that feels good. But then maybe releasing through your jaw, right under your ears and in front of your ears, just a little movement, acknowledging how often we can clamp down in the temporal mandibular joint, that spot that you can clench and maybe hold back, right? Hold back all those emotions. So finding a little release here, behind the ears, if you'd like, base of your skull, self-massage, self-touch, and that intention of greeting yourself with compassion. And along these same lines, if you'd like, you can greet your ears and you can roll out your earlobes or roll them inward. Our ears can be very tender places. And you might even, towards the inside of the ear, this is called the concha, the seashell. It's like that circular area around the ear canal. It's considered to be 100% vagal fibers, and giving that a little self-massage. And in front of your ears, a little gentle massage of this cartilage that's called the tragus. And just as we did before, when you feel ready, just resting your palms for a moment and receiving just that input. And noticing in the pause what may have changed, how this is resonating, what may be recalibrating. And all of this is intentionally in service of resourcing you, resourcing us, ourselves, our cells, our community. And perhaps one more little piece here, if you'd like. One hand on your belly, one hand over your heart. And sensing your breath. And hands can be a little bit of a feedback system here. So you can perhaps begin to sense the movement, expanding your belly just a little bit, or across your diaphragm, or even across the rib cage, sensing how you can reach the breath up towards your collarbones and sternum. And how on the exhale, we can even feel how we can support our bodies to let go, just physically moving towards emptiness, so that we can be mindful of what we take in, what we fill into that space. And you might notice how spine wants to support this breath integration so that you can follow that exhale into contraction. And inhale, allowing spine to expand and lift. And finding your rhythm with breath and movement. And if you'd like, you might even let the arms be an extension of this moving shape, this recognition that we can all go between states of expansion and contraction. And this itself is in alignment with all of nature, following the way that we are called to greet the world and move outward and mobilize and stretch, as well as turn inward and reset and arrive and land and root. And those roots expand the next moment of expansion, right? So that we find how we can sustain that core connection to self, even as we open to the world, and that we know when it's time to go back and digest what we've taken in. And that digestion lets us distinguish what is mine, what is not mine, so that I can organize around the true nature of self. And then returning back into that relative stillness. Sensing that internally there may continue to be the pulsation, those openings and closings of the heart, of the energy body, of your cells. Like flowers opening and closing, like the waves on the ocean. And one final little breath practice that just sets up the mind and body for taking in a little bit of information, if you'd like to do so, is a little bit of alternate nostril pranayama. Just a brief visit here. And if you're joining me, maybe the right hand, the thumb can be used here to close off through the right nostril as we inhale through the left. And then switching, closing off left, exhale right. Inhaling right. And exhale left. Inhale left. And I'll let you find your own rhythm of breath. Moving from side to side, switching the hand at the top of the inhale. And next time you exhale out the left, perhaps releasing your right hand. And of course, you are welcome to continue that for as long as you'd like. And really being with what is going to best serve you during this time. Knowing that you can continue to take in anything that I'm sharing here today while laying on the ground, while laying in bed, while moving, stretching, whatever you'd like, so that there's, very much an honoring of what you need to support you. And I did plan a little bit of a sharing of the why of the practice through a few slides. And I'm thinking I'll try and spend maybe only 20 minutes or so with slides so that we have some time at the end for interaction, which to me would be meaningful if that's meaningful for you all as well. So I'm going to pull up some slides, knowing once again, and I can see you there, Joyce, resting on your back. You know everything I'm going to share. You've seen all these slides. Stay there. But if you'd like to see the slides and you want to come to sitting, I'm going to pull them up now. So it'll be a little visual shift. And Sarah's going to help me later if there are questions, but you all are also welcome to unmute and ask them and all of that good stuff. So we'll save that for after this next little portion. Okay. And give me just a little thumbs up. Have these come across okay for you all? Yeah. Good. Thank you for the thumbs up. I appreciate it, Kelly. Good. Thanks. Nice. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about trauma recovery and yoga. And it's very related to grief, right? I think that I always envision that all trauma work is grief work. Not all grief work is trauma work, but often there's complicated layers and of grief. And so we can certainly make space for and attend to when trauma is part of the mix. A little bit about what trauma is. It's, a pretty broad definition that I'll offer you here, which is that we might envision this here as any event that overwhelms the ordinary human adaptations to life. And when we say the human adaptations, the experience that I would offer is that we are constantly taking in information and digesting and hopefully assimilating that which we want to keep from an experience and that which is not me, that which is not ours. So that integration of moving out into the world, sensing and feeling, and then coming back in and digesting and discerning is that core rhythm as well. So whatever experiences we take in, hopefully can be integrated into the whole of who I am. But when a traumatic event happens and it overwhelms that human adaptation capacity, what begins to occur is that I've taken in too much information, or it was too much for too long, or too little for too long. So there's ways in which I can't cope with, I can't integrate that experience. I don't know how to adapt around that experience. So I call my work resilience-informed therapy, resilience-informed treatment, because it's about how do we reclaim our ability to adapt. And resilience is that adapting well. It's both a psychological capacity to flexibly respond to challenge and our physiological capacity to handle a broader range of nervous system states. So I can go into states of excitement and joy. I can even handle stress, the inevitabilities of that. And I can also come back to rest and recovery and ease. So I don't get stuck in keyed on states of anxiety and panic, and I don't get stuck in a shutdown or a collapse. But what we know with trauma is that it's more likely to get caught up or stuck in those different nervous system states. It's a normal response to trauma. And not being resilient or not feeling resilient doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, because resilience really requires a lot of support and community and resource. And that's, of course, what we're here together, exploring and tapping into. And in one of the ways, there's certainly lots that I can, say about resilience, but for today's kind of pithy topic, we're going to look at this from the perspective of the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is our 10th cranial nerve, and it has connections and extensions into our eyes and ears and mouth and through touch, and takes in information about movement and our heart rate and feedback from our lungs and digestive organs, and sends all of that information, all of the interoceptive information about how you feel and what you've taken in from your senses, and sends this into your brainstem so that that information can be useful, can be made useful, and we can take in those sensory experiences. And just like our gut, is able to digest, this is nourishing and this is not good for me, can start to tease out, what do I want to make a part of me and what do I need to let go of or excrete or release? And so the vagus nerve is very much a part of that. It's considered kind of an information highway, mostly sending information from body to brain. And Steve Porges, one of my mentors, describes the vagus nerve as this power cord to the computer, which is your brainstem. So sending all of this information in so that your brainstem can use it to do its job, which is to regulate your autonomic nervous system and your blood pressure and your heart rate and your breathing rate and your sleep-wake cycles and coordinated movement and so forth. And what's beautiful about practices like yoga is that we're following this directionality that's built into your body. There's wisdom in how the vagus nerve functions, and that there's a reason why 80% is body up to brain. That has a very strong regulating capacity. So when we key into things like movement and breath awareness, we're actually working with our nervous system, with our biology, sending information right along the same lines that we're already wired to receive. And when we change the rate of how we're breathing, or when we offer ourselves that self-touch or that humming that we explored, we are giving input right into those regulation centers to better be able to navigate our sensory input and better digest. So the vagus nerve tends to put the brakes on the sympathetic nervous system, but in a very refined way. When we're engaging vagal toning practices, we can upregulate or downregulate, which means that if we're feeling really collapsed and helpless and depressed, we can use vagal toning to actually create more of an uprightness or a capacity to kind of greet or stand strong. And if we're feeling really anxious and keyed up, we can use vagal toning to help us relax and settle in. So we can move up and down what Deb Dana refers to as this ladder of polyvagal kind of levels of functioning. So the vagus nerve within this frame of polyvagal theory is viewed to have different kind of evolutionary functions or presentations. So when in the earliest evolutionary circuit within the vagus nerve connects down below the diaphragm, down into all of our digestive organs, as well as the bladder and the kidneys, but also stomach and intestines and pancreas. And when we feel safe, that can initiate this rest and digest response. And at times when we feel unsafe, this can initiate a faint response or a collapse response, like a very shut down. You can think here of like the possum that goes extremely still. And there's kind of evolutionary purposes of that kind of shutdown for protective reasons. And then from an evolutionary standpoint, if that one was 500 million years ago, the sympathetic nervous system came in about 400 million years ago, give or take a few years, right? And that's our mobilizing response. Basically, it helps us protect ourselves in the world, fight and flight. Right now, we can flee from a predator, or we can fight that predator. Whereas before that, the only response you can think about fish or reptiles was to freeze, right? Or I guess reptiles can run, but really early reptilian creatures, just that freeze response coming over. And then in kind of this evolutionary trajectory, the upper circuits of the vagus nerve go into more of a social engagement system. So you can think about mammals here needing a lot more time and proximity, and through nursing and that mammalian connection, this recognition that connection is a biological imperative. So the upper reaches of the vagus nerve go into the muscles around the eyes and the ears and the mouth and the throat and the heart and lungs, all of which have social communication functions. So that upper pathway, we recognize it because there's a sparkle in the eye and a prosody of voice tone and a natural smile and a feeling of being calm and connected. So we consider this that feeling of the face, or the ears-heart connection, the way that listening is about how are we hearing something and how does it feel and how does it resonate and how are we communicating. So all of that is deeply intertwined via the vagus nerve. Once again, this is a very refined break, and it's strengthened through relationships. So we have ways in which, through repeated practice and through relational experiences, we can strengthen that social engagement system. And as I said already, it can help us upregulate towards more alertness or downregulate into more calmness as needed. And that neuroception is a journey of kind of the awareness of the nervous system state to detect whether situations or people are safe or dangerous or life-threatening. And that these kinds of observations can arise from our own body or from our external environment or from the relationships that we're in. And that this happens all the time and does not require conscious awareness. So your nervous system is taking this information in, responding to your environment automatically. And importantly, you can bring conscious perception to neuroception. So you can start to pay attention to the cues that are coming in via your nervous system, via your body, via the state of mind you're in, or the quality of energy, or how you're breathing. And when we pay attention to that, that lets us start to be an active participant in regulating our own nervous system. So we're not in the automaticity of reaction, but we can be more in response. In the therapeutic yoga for trauma model that I write about in my book and that I teach, I refer to neuroception as a form of svadhyaya, or self-study, and one of the niyamas. So as svadhyaya, we begin to observe or study the state of mind, the state of our body, our emotions, our breath and energy, so that you can begin to notice whether it feels easy or difficult for you to sit still, or are you moving more or less than usual? Maybe noticing your own urge to fidget, or feeling sluggish or restless, feeling slumped or collapsed or frozen. So we get to just notice, become the observer, right? Like, I know in times with my own work, it's those subtleties of like, my left leg feels like it's clenching. Let me follow that with curiosity. What happens? Oh, wow, there's like a whole emerging dialogue I can have with the clenching and that urge to withdraw and curl my left toes. And wow, how am I pulling away from the earth? And how does that relate? And where did that begin? How is that feeling familiar? So we can follow the thread from the body into an unwinding pattern. What wants to happen next? We can notice through the quality of mind, right? The kinds of thoughts. Is your mindset one of curiosity and creativity, or are you feeling critical or rigid? Without judgment, right? That's what's so delicate, right? If we're in the judgmental mindset, that itself is something to notice. But perhaps the invitation is to move towards a quality of open-mindedness, or and to even hold compassion if we feel blocked, if that's possible. And then emotionally, we might notice the emotions that are present and make space for that. Notice how we're breathing, get curious about it. Notice the quality of your energy. Do you feel vigilant or foggy or fatigued or relaxed or spacey? Expansive or contracted energetically? Okay? And with curiosity, we can follow that as well. From the perspective of how we create change, we recognize that neuroplasticity is one of the kind of fundamental science of change, right? There's the recognition that our brain has about 86 billion neurons with thousands of connections, and that all of our memories and beliefs and behaviors are carried as these encoded neural networks. But every time we introduce a new experience, we're creating change in brain and body, and that this can occur throughout our entire lifespan. So when we are purposefully engaging in behaviors or breath patterns or movement patterns that move us in the direction that we're wanting to grow ourselves towards, right? Now we can be a participant in who am I becoming? right? Because life can happen to us and we can feel bombarded by events and experiences. But when I can create these, what I'll say, a controlled environment on your yoga mat, right? When we can create these opportunities to practice growing ourselves in the direction of a wanted change. Now, what can happen next? So stunning. So this kind of neuroplastic change sometimes also requires that we inhibit the habits, the habit of mind, the habit of how we're breathing, the habit of contracting while we're embracing something new, a new possibility, so that we're growing ourselves in that wanted direction. And as I mentioned during our practice, it really needs to occur within this foundation of choice, so that we create this kind of secure home base, and that yoga allows us to find this moment by moment exploration and allows us to maybe choose to soften our defenses, because that itself is a choice. And it's very delicate, it's very vulnerable to let go. And choosing to do so in right time and right place with right support. Yoga also lets us explore through movement, those maybe ways in which we want to follow those instinctual movement patterns that can help us not only gain physical strength and balance and coordination and dexterity and breath capacity, but also maybe release the stuff that got stuck in there, the things that get bound in the body. As Dr. Porges says, that the yoga practitioner transitions from focusing on these external senses, the external factors, that to bodily processes that are linked to that regulation of our autonomic nervous system. And then once we've got some regulation in the autonomic nervous system, then we might create a little challenge, right? We might add a little bit of a practice that creates a temporary stress response, so that we can explore how do we recover from stress within the controlled environment of your yoga mat, right? So if I go into a breath practice or a movement practice that increases my heart rate, it's a temporary stress response that I then get to play with. And then finally, right, after exploring the range of possibility within the autonomic nervous system, maybe within that state of stillness, that resting state, I can explore how it feels to expand my consciousness into the interior of the wisdom state that resides inside of each and every one of us, right? So you can go inward and discover that interconnected roots between you and the universe. Pretty beautiful. So we do this safely with trauma, because we can get stuck in either expansion or contraction in trauma type experiences. So we explore what we call dual awareness, which is that we hold a connection to the ground as we're touching into those places where we might have gotten stuck. We're keeping awareness of the space around me and cues of safety and relational cues of connection, while I go towards just a little bit of distress with enough safety, right? Or I can hold that proprioceptive grounding of here's where I begin and end in space, as I go towards some of the interoceptive felt sense of the pain or the wounds from the past. So in yoga, we have these opportunities for dual awareness in asana, where you can feel the shape of your body and that grounding into that physical practice. Pranayama, we can anchor the mind into the sound of the breath, or the count of your breath, or the sensation of your breath as a sensory anchor, as you bring a little bit of attention to an emotion, but not losing yourself there. We can create grounding through drishti, right? Maybe eyes open at your fingertips or at an item in your room. These flowers were from my garden last summer, right? Really pretty. Like just having some beautiful items of beauty in your space to help anchor safety. We can anchor dual awareness with mantra, right? So that we can focus on the sound or the mental repetition that anchors our sensory awareness, like the humming that we did earlier. And mudra, right? The anchor of awareness into maybe a shape of the hands, or the touch of the fingertips, or the pressing of the palms. And so what is the vagal toning. What is vagus nerve stimulation? It's, I prefer the term personally neuromodulation, even though it's a scientific terms, but neuro means the nervous system, and modulation means change. So we're creating change in the state of our nervous system. And sometimes the phrase hacking gets used out there. Personally, for me, I'm not a huge fan of the use of the word hacking for this because it feels a little aggressive. That's my personal feeling on it. Especially because I once had my website hacked and I didn't like that feeling. So the word doesn't have too many appealing associations. But for me, vagal toning, it really has an emphasis on social connection, whether that's interpersonally or within oneself, feeling self-compassion as a form of social connection, and present-centered, present moment sense of safety. So ideally, it's soothing and stimulating at the same time. And there's lots of practices that facilitate this. Conscious breathing as a form of neuromodulation, humming, as we explored, and safe and sound protocol refers to a sound-based protocol developed by Steve Porges and the Unite listening systems that has passive input into the inner ear that can have a calming response. Tragus and conscious stimulation we did before, the stimulation of the ears. Eye movements and working with the eyes as kind of forms of stretch that can increase blood flow to the cervical vertebrae. Postural change, self-touch, which we explored on the mat as well, and then compassion, loving kindness, and gratitude practices. So a little bit on each of these, and we did this experientially, so I'm going to move relatively quickly through the actual slides, but this is the kind of why, and I love to give you all the slides, so you can have this as reference points to come back to. But the recognition that our breathing is the fastest or most direct way to regulate the autonomic nervous system through both stimulation of the sympathetic and also activation of the parasympathetic rhythmically through each breath. And that when we're working with therapeutic yoga, you get to really be at choice about how to breathe. We can work with even inhales and exhales, or that Samavriti or balancing breath. And a calming breath is a longer exhale, and a sigh has so many great benefits. There's lots of great research on the physiological sigh. We did this a little bit on the mat as a practice today, that alternate nostril pranayama. We practice this on the mat of kind of those pressure points of where the vagus nerve is close to the surface of your face, and how these also can correspond to acupressure points and meridian lines in the Chinese medicine system that are considered to be beneficial for the health of your organs. And meridians, which will be a lovely segue into your yin yoga practice that's coming after me, because that's a lot of working with the meridians as well, can be thought of these channels of energy connected to your major organ systems. So we, even just the facial points that we worked with today through gentle touch or tapping can start to get that energy flowing. And these are the points that we worked with today. The large intestine and the urinary bladder and the stomach points. The vagus nerve points in the ear that we worked with are in your handouts as well. And then the listening and a little bit of that science behind how the humming can come into that inner middle ear area, and regulating those middle ear bones and muscles to enhance the sensitivity to the sound of the human voice, and hopefully reduce some of the sensitivity to the low vibration sounds. So you can kind of imagine, if you're engaging in those practices, that it's more like singing yourself a lullaby than trying to force any experience upon yourself. And so that's the Brahmari pranayama that we did, the humming practice. And then lastly, integrated a little bit of that self-havening today, that quality of how touch has been shown to reduce heart rate and blood pressure, and releases all these really good hormones and neurochemicals and all that good stuff. I think of it too as a way of kind of bringing that self-compassion in through the self-applied touch. So those are some of the whys. This is some of the resources that I have out there for you, including what Sarah already named, as you can find me on YouTube, and I post all of that on my Facebook page as well. But mostly I'm going to take this down because I want to connect with you, see what's moving in the room and what you might be needing out of this time. Oops, try to make you bigger. There we go. How are you doing? With a lot of information in a very short period of time. It's like a condensing of what I teach in a 20-hour course for you in like 20 minutes. So what's happening out there? Oh, yes, you can. I like sharing those books. I will show them to you again. So those are the books that I have out there. And I also have a few of them here that kind of form the basis of what I was sharing with you today. Whoops, that was the end of my slideshow. There they are. Otherwise, you look at a black screen. But anyway, you can find out about all of those on my website. So thank you for asking. I don't know if they're in your handouts as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take this back down again. And like I said, the most recent one that came out was in May of this year, and that's the Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma. And Autumn, you're not alone. I think at this point on the planet, most of us carry a lot of trauma in our bodies, whether it's from our own life experience, whether it is from the accumulation of generations and the collective amount of grief and trauma that we are all kind of swimming in the soup of, and hence it's so incredibly important to take care of our nervous systems and bodies and minds. Yeah. I'm going to read the chat and then I'm going to open it up, Ain, for you to share. Molly says, me too. It feels overwhelming to figure out where to start with practices to release this. And I think there's a lot of agreement with you there, Molly. I'm reading the chat. I agree. Where do we start? For me, I often start with what we just did. I literally start every single practice in my morning with these kind of self-havening and sensory and the self-touch on the face and self-touch on the body and the breath, like the most simple practices that we don't want to underestimate the power of. Yeah. So thank you, Molly, for that. It's, and to be so, I would say like a combination of what we did with those intentions around how can I hold myself in the most loving way, or who can I bring in to help hold me in the most loving way, so that, we often talk about in this world that there's a way of like co-regulation precedes self-regulation. Being held by another gives us the feeling of how we then learn to hold ourselves in those tender places. And, so I think that's the kind of shared value again of GSN, is that there's these spaces we can go towards to hopefully feel that belonging and connection of being held. Yeah. Ain, let me see if I can ask you to, oh, you got it. Good.
Yeah, I got it. Hi, I'm Ain, and you said my name right.
Great.
I just have to say, like half an hour before we started, I like had a fangirl moment where I was like, oh my gosh. Because I first found you through you're why I'm here at this thing anyway, right? Like I first found you through Sounds True and got, one of your recorded courses there, and then got your book, and then followed like so many things. Like really, like yeah. And I guess what I wanted to just say, as someone who is like having okay, as someone who has experienced a lot of grief in my life and who has had to come to understand how to let that grief go,
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had a lot of practice before I found you and before I found this network. But I think what you were talking about today, about, you know, especially like the tools that you were talking about, and specifically yoga, like I'm a yoga teacher and a yoga practitioner, and that it isn't all just to like calm us down, and it isn't all just to let it go, you know. And I talk about that in my classes. Like, people are like, why are you going to yoga? Like, just to chill out? No, it's to become more capable of going up and going down. And it's just recently that I've come to start to understand this idea of the vagal break. But I think that's something that's so potent, you know, especially with people saying in the chat, like, oh, I have so much trauma in my body, I have so much grief in my body. And it isn't just like opening yourself up and letting it all out, because that doesn't work. It does, well, yeah, because it doesn't work. And also because like the purpose of these practices isn't just relief, it's to build, I think it sounds like, from what you're saying and from my experience, it's to build the toolkit of ways to up and down regulate ourselves. And I would just say also to other people who are wondering how to start with these practices, they should sign up for your email list and get your weekly emails that have practices in them. Because I get those every week, and I don't do them every week, but I do them when I need to. And I'm like, oh, I would just offer that as a supportive thing too. But really, yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate everything that you said. And I wanted to do like jazz hands when you were like, it's not just about down regulating. I'm like, yes. And it's about like, sometimes it's about lion's breath, and sometimes it's about empowerment, and sometimes it's about saying no on your yoga mat, right? Like all of that can be part of this too. And there was a question that came in terms of the how in regards to titration, right? Like, what is titration? And I think it's such a worthy piece, and it connects to everything that you're saying, because we, you know, as we go towards where the discomfort or the holding or that pain is, right, where that, whether it's grief, whether it's trauma, whether it's both, you know, right in there, that can we go toward it enough where we feel like we've accessed it, we've said hello, we've greeted, we've welcomed that in, and then can we also have that anchor? This is that dual awareness. Can I have enough of that sensory anchor to, I know that I'm connected enough, that I'm safe enough, that it's, you know, that there's a ground for me from which I can turn towards the pain, the discomfort, the holding, the contraction, without feeling like I'm going to get swallowed by it. And exactly, and you know, highlighted in the comments here, safe enough with capitals, because you know, finding 100% safety in our current world, right? But we can find the relative safety of our yoga mat, or the relative safety of a safe enough community, the relative safety of a therapy office, these places where we can go towards the pain and the discomfort and our own suffering, and still feel that there's the container that can help hold us as we're holding or turning towards that. Yeah. And letting go is an unforced process. Right? It's something that we can allow for, and we can also put the brakes on. Yeah. Joy, you look like you want to say something. Go for it. Hang on, you are still muted though. There we go.
I was typing and I don't have my glasses on, but I just wanted you to talk more about self-efficacy and establishing a sense of self-agency in regard to what AIM was talking about also.
Yeah, yeah.
Using yoga as you were talking about increasing the heart rate and things like that, but in this controlled environment. But for those of us who have been traumatized, that had been in a chronic state of fight and flight,
Yeah.
it's really hard to even recognize those changes in the body until you
Right.
train yourself to slow down enough to see it, to feel
Yeah,
it.
I mean, in a way, you're kind of answering your question as you ask it. So I love that part of how we reclaim. First of all, I want to define self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is a sense that my actions will make a difference in the outcome of, right? And if we've experienced chronic, repeated, complex PTSD or developmental trauma or trauma in a world that feels so out of control, we can lose self-efficacy. We can feel like no matter what I do, it's not going to make a difference. And so to reclaim self-efficacy, to reclaim a sense of what I'm doing is going to make a difference in my day. It's going to make a difference in, we start small. We start by noticing when I breathe in this way, it leads to this particular outcome. I feel calmer, I feel more grounded, or I feel more empowered, or whatever the word you might fit in. I feel safer, I feel more tender, I feel softer, right? So we have different breath patterns that can create different feelings. When I move this way, fill in the blank, like it creates this change. When I do my morning practice, it sets me up to have be more present in my day. When I have repeated morning practices, I feel like I'm more able to catch when I go into reaction off the mat in the world, and I can be more mindful of how I'm reacting to other people, right? So here's how we're reclaiming it. But it starts right here with like the little micro practices on your yoga mat, where you start to see that little things make a difference, and then it can build from there. And it's so especially needed if we've had experiences in the world where no matter what I do, it doesn't feel like it's going to make a difference. So we can start to hone in on those smaller, subtler experiences.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah.
And did you talk about Porges and the social engagement? Can you elaborate on that a little bit
Yeah.
while you're talking about connection with the group?
Yeah, to me, the social engagement, or that upper vagal pathway, it's what we're doing right now, right? It's how are we, sensing and feeling each other and receiving and taking in. I mean, I'm really, in this moment, and Anais, part of me for maybe calling out your name if you're not ready for that. So I'm like asking for your excuse in advance, but you have actually a very, very beautiful present expression right now, where I can just sense that you're just dropped in with yourself, right? And so, if I'm tuning in to the feeling of you and kind of making that connection, there's a way in which I watch even the subtle shift in your own expression of being of the experience of me bearing witness, right? And as I receive that response in you, it touches me. And then we go back and forth, and there's this reciprocity, right? Oh, look at that. It's so beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And so like that's what we hopefully can hold and bear witness to each other. And it's actually quite lovely that we have a relatively small group, and that we do get to hold each other, and so with given that I know that we're going a little bit over and we'll have to end soon, but that to me, it's like, how do we see and hear and feel and respond to, and then let that grow, and let that build, because that's where that lives, right? And sometimes it's better to feel it, a bit experientially as much as intellectually. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Joy, for the question. Exactly, right? It's that hand on the heart. It's that little nod. It's that sense of like, oh, I got to name that I have a lot of trauma in my body, and to have that be echoed by others that say, yeah, me too, right? Yeah. And Autumn, I'm just going to name that I see you too, and there's and you're held here, right? Like we've got each other, and I think we need that. Yeah. So,
I'm gonna.
yeah. Oops, Joy, you muted in the middle of your sentence there. Yeah.
I have to say I'm a star fan. I've actually been taking Arielle's courses, more psychologically based,
Mhm.
but I've been doing this since I met Arielle in 2020 through an embodiment um, em- embodiment
Summit.
summit or
Yeah.
conference or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But these practices have changed my life, and I don't want to get
Yeah.
emo about it, but it's just so
Mhm.
true.
Yeah.
And just this was the missing piece for me because I
Mhm.
didn't know that my trauma was causing a neurobiological,
Yeah.
physiological panic in my body. And so I wasn't able to get it out and talk therapy or anything like that because I didn't know it was going on. And it was a big aha moment for me. So thank you. And everyone, please take advantage of this wonderful teacher. It, it,
Thank you. Yeah.
it will change your life.
I appreciate that, Joy. Yeah. Um, you're reminding me of feedback from one of the regular Saturday morning classes. So I teach yoga on Saturday mornings. You're all welcome to join us. It's the next one's on the 12th of November. And one of those students decided that he was going to practice one of the YouTube videos every single day. And so he's been doing this now for, I think, something like 5 or 6 months. And so I periodically get an email from him saying like what he's noticing when he does the practice every day. It's really cool. It's really, really cool to hear that feedback. And it's very parallel to what you just said, Joy. So that's why those practices are out there. You go find them on YouTube. There's short ones and there's longer 1.5 hour long classes because that's what I teach on Saturdays. Thanks for tossing that into the chat, Sarah. And I hope to see you again there. We'll see you maybe on November 12th. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Arielle.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
everyone, thank you for showing up for this because
Mhm.
your life is about to change.
If we haven't met before, right? Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate that. I'm glad you were here. All right. Well, Sarah, enjoy the rest of hosting all of this. And thank you again for hosting me.
Yeah, thank you so much, here, Arielle. We just adore you, and I'm so grateful to have you here and being a part of this summit.
Yeah.
We are about to move into a yin practice, followed directly after by a bath. So we have a beautiful afternoon and closing to this 3-day summit ahead of us. So please take a break, get yourselves ready for a yin practice. Grab any, bolsters, blocks, straps, anything that you may have. You can also grab items around your household if you don't have any of those, readily available. You can use towels, blankets, a necktie, or a belt for your strap. You can use books instead of blocks. Lots of options. So we will see you in the next session. And Arielle, thank you again so much.
Thank you again. Thank you again. All right. Bye-bye.